This Saturday, November 21st, the Ultimate Fighting Championship will treat us to its second-to-last pay-per-view event of 2020. UFC 255 will go down in history as the night of the flyweights, as 5 of the 12 bouts will take place in either the men's or women's 125-pound divisions, including, of course, the title doubleheader atop the card. Even outside of that quintet of fights, however, the card skews remarkably light, with no heavyweight bouts and only one at light heavyweight. Combined with the fact that only 4 fighters on the bill are over 35 years old, this feels like a card built for speed. Of course, that might be an attempt to cover up that fact that the card is light in another way. Outside of the flyweight division, where 2 of the fights are for titles and 2 others have at least somewhat immediate title implications, UFC 255 features no top 10 fighters. Good evening and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 255, Figueiredo versus Perez. I'm your host, Ben Duffy from Sherdog.com, and with me is Keith Schillen, executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as a writer for Sherdog.com and a host and creator of numerous shows for Sherdog Radio, including the Schillen and Duffy Show. Keith, I will lead off with this question. Leaving aside my extremely forced metaphor about the literal weights of the fighters, does UFC 255 feel light for a pay-per-view?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, what an introduction, man. You keep cranking these out perfectly, and I appreciate the introduction of me. I don't know if I ever got it that well, so yeah, way to go. Yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, it feels like a fight night card, like a good fight night card. Like, oh, wow, 2 title fights. But think about this, and I could be wrong, but Figueiredo's 2 fights against Benavidez, both for the title, they both were fight nights, weren't they? Like, neither one was a pay-per-view.
Yeah, there was Fight Night 169 and Fight Night 172.
Yeah. So, I mean, he faced a bigger name in Joseph Benavidez than Alex Perez. And those weren't pay-per-views. Valentina Shevchenko, when's the last time she headlined a pay-per-view? Amanda Nunes rematch, I believe? I mean, I could be wrong, but, you know, most of hers are co-main events, isn't that? So what happened was they wanted something else, and that's not what happened. Like, wasn't there another fight? Was it Usman and Burns? Was this was scheduled for this, right?
No, I don't think that was this one. Like,
was it rumored? Was it rumored at least?
The one that I thought was rumored for this card was Aldo versus now I can't remember. Because the Amanda Nunes got canceled. That wasn't on this one. That was on the next one. Right.
You know what? I'm going through, and you're right. I think they expected it, but it never got even like rumored to happen. The Burns and Usman. But yeah, I mean, this is not what they wanted. I think they wanted something else, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Here, put yourself in the shoes of a casual fan. You're the fan who watches at least part of most of the free ESPN cards. Maybe you order a couple of pay-per-views per year. Maybe you go out to the Wings and Boobs for a couple more of them. The last 3 pay-per-views were Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje, Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa, and Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier 3. Yeah. After those 3 in a row, is this one getting you out to the Wings and Boobs? Is it getting your wallet out of your pocket, or are you giving this one a miss?
Well, I don't think they even know it. Like, if you're a absolute casual fan, this probably doesn't even come across your radar. You know, like a guy at work today asked me about Colby Covington of all people. And I said, well, there's actually a pay-per-view this weekend. He had no idea. And he, kind of always asked me, he's not, the big fan, but he'll ask me about Adesanya. Oh, this guy fights in Adesanya. Does he have a chance? One of those guys. And he'll find a way to watch it and read between the lines. But as far as, like, should you go to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch this or wherever place you go? Yeah, you should. I mean, we're about to record a breakdown of all these fights, so I hope you watch it. Yeah. And if you're listening to this breakdown, I'm assuming you're going to find a way to watch it, whether it's order it. But you know what? To me, if you get – oh, actually, I always say this, but I probably shouldn't say this now, but I always say get 8 friends to all throw in a couple bucks each, and then you can watch it. Not in the time of social distancing. Should I be telling people to do that? But you go to a bar and watch it, sure. But will they? I don't think it will. I think this is going to do historically bad numbers.
And I mean, as you're listening to us talk about this, keep in mind that we're not denigrating this card. We're two guys that have probably put double-digit hours into looking into these fights, and we're going to spend at least an hour talking about them. So we're sure not trying to talk you out of watching these fights. And in fact, as we break them down, we're probably going to give you more reasons to watch them, because for a historically under-the-radar card that might do historically bad pay-per-view numbers, there's definitely some treasure on here.
Yeah, there's some good prospects. If you're a fan of the Contender Series, there's a lot of Contender Series guys. I mean, we're talking about in the main event, Alex Perez. He could be the first guy in history to win a UFC championship coming from the Contender Series. And when I was thinking about that, it reminds me of about, and don't quote me on the exact year, but about 2004 when the Ultimate Fighters kind of burst on scene. Mm-hmm. And you've been around for a long time. I've been around for a long time. We'll remember this. There was like a divide between fans of MMA. There was the real fans who were before the Ultimate Fighter, and then the new fans. And they were like, you were hated on if you were a new fan. And even the fighters who represented the Ultimate Fighter were hated on. They, Forrest Griffin fought Tito Ortiz. I still remember when Forrest Griffin almost beat Tito Ortiz. That was the one we were like, wait a minute, maybe these guys are pretty good. These guys were supposed to get blown out the water. These were reality stars. They weren't real fighters. And you kind of get that, like, not to the grand scale of the Ultimate Fighter like they did, but you get a little bit like that. Like, one of our, I don't want to throw him on the bus, but he said, like, oh, Perez got it because the Contender Series connection. It's like, Perez is a good fighter. That's why he got it too, and the door was open. And, is that the why he got it over Moreno? Probably, but... So it doesn't have the same stigma as the Ultimate Fighter does, but there is still a little bit of that, like, there's people hate on Sean O'Malley and people hate on these Contender Series guys, and I don't get it.
Nope. At this point, the Contender Series, it's just another feeder organization. I mean, I will look down on a Contender Series guy if I'm like, oh, dude, I saw you lose 3 times in LFA. You just happened to get a really great knockout on the Contender Series. But it's because I know that fighter. It's not just because I'm dismissing the Contender Series. That's
absolutely right. Yeah. Another thing, going back to like why the card won't sell, it always goes down to stars. Just because someone's not a star in name does not mean that it won't be a fun fight, fun night. And also, like, you think about the main event, the flyweights have always historically, even when you had Demetrius Johnson, one of the most dominant champions of all time, a guy that I always said should be a star, but he, a guy who did some amazing feats, some of the most impressive performances ever. I mean, his armbar of Ray Borg may be the greatest submission I've ever seen. He's done all these things, but he couldn't sell. So you have that division who's always kind of been put on the back burner, but then you have a champion who's Brazilian, who doesn't speak English, which always hurts in the American market, the Canadian market, those English-speaking markets. But you also have a Brazilian with a weird, tough to pronounce last name, which I would say up to a year ago there was hardcore fans who didn't know how to say his name. Never mind casual fans. You got Alex Perez, who nobody knows who he is, other than hardcores. Even Jennifer Myers, like. She's another Brazilian, doesn't really, I mean, she speaks English a little bit, but she's not, that's not her dominant language. She's not one of these women who, and I shouldn't even be saying this, but she's not one of these women who like sells herself by her sex appeal. Like, she's not like, she's not posting her ass all over Instagram, So there's not really, I mean, what's the most marketable? You watch the Embedded, what's the most marketable thing on the Embedded or the Countdown show that Valentina Shevchenko can shoot a gun really good?
They definitely go back to that a lot because even though her English is great, she's just kind of awkward and cold on the mic. It's interesting.
Yeah.
She has a pleasant personality. I mean, I've covered events live. I've been in media scrums and asked her questions from 3 feet away. She's perfectly pleasant, but what she puts there just kind of lies there on the plate. Like, she's not a shit talker, which that's great. We're not short of those, but not especially funny, not especially open. She's just kind of, very professional. And apparently that's not, that is not overcome by the fact that she is arguably the most dominant fighter in the sport right now in terms of what they're doing to their own division. And a subjectively attractive woman. And
yeah, absolutely. She's the person, if she was your neighbor, she's the one you wave to while you're taking out the trash and you say hi. And if you're cutting the grass near that line, maybe you stop and talk for a minute. But she's not the neighbor you invite over to watch the Patriots game on Sunday. That's the other side neighbor.
Well, especially when you see like the Glock tattooed on her rib panel.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when I make sure none of my trash is blowing into her yard.
That's right. Absolutely. You make sure you have the bag on the lawnmower. None of those clippings are getting thrown over there.
All right. With that out of the way, let's dig into the 12 fights that make up UFC 255. And right out of the gate, it is a welterweight matchup between Dana White's Contender Series alum Louis Cosce taking on the also debuting Sasha Palatnikov. Cosce made a very successful appearance on the Contender Series along with his brother Ariane back in August. In fact, both were scheduled to be on this card. We'll probably come back to talking about Ariane for a sec a little bit later. Cosce is 25 years old, 7-0. Sasha Palatnikov is 5-2. He's 31 years old. He does have the distinction of being the first fighter from Hong Kong to fight in the UFC, and that is legit, no smoke and mirrors. He is born, raised, and had a lot of his early career over there. But nonetheless, he's one of those guys that this is definitely a new thing to MMA in the era of COVID, but he's a guy who picked up stakes and moved to Vegas this year and started training at Syndicate just so he could be in Vegas and ready for a short notice call-up. And it appears to have paid off. Now, whether he'll be the first fighter from Hong Kong to win a fight in the UFC is an entirely different question as he walks into the cage. Right now, he's around a plus 300 underdog. Cosce close to minus 400 as the favorite. What do you think about this one, Keith?
Well, right away, the betting line seems a little off to me, just simply from the fact that this is the battle of two fighters that there is not much tape out there to study. The reason why I say that, Cosce doesn't have any tape study because he just buzzsaws everybody. So, I mean, his fights are out there, but they end in 15 seconds, 35 seconds. You don't get to see much from him. Even on the Contender Series, I think his win in the Contender Series was like a minute long.
Yep.
You go over to Palatnikov, there isn't much film on him simply because, as you mentioned, he lives in Hong Kong. I think he's fought in like the Korean MMA circuit, which is not the easiest one to find. So out of every fight on this card, this is the one that I've got the least tape study on. Cosce, I did do tape study on him for the Contender Series. I mean, he's the younger brother of the two Cosces. He's a fantastic athlete, very explosive, very aggressive, very violent. One of these guys just seems like he likes hurting his opponents. He's got big crushing power, fast hands, really good high kick that he throws. Like he gets blocked, but that's okay because he throws it so hard. He mixes that high kick in with his combos, which I've talked a million times. I just love that variety. He does have a wrestling background, though I haven't really seen it based on him just knocking guys out so quickly. Once he's on top, from some I have seen, just brutal, vicious ground and pound. I am worried about his cardio because we haven't seen him go the distance yet. I think every one of his fights has been a stoppage. So that's a little worrisome. Move over to the Hong Kong fighter, which just seems weird to say. Also a good athlete. He has some basic boxing. He keeps his hands a little low. He also throws one strike at a time, which I really don't like. Good kicks, though. He must have some kind of karate background because he has a little like bladed stance, spinning attacks, spinning wheel kicks. Decent wrestler, especially surprising for that circuit. Good reactionary double, pretty good in the scrambles. He does go for submissions a lot from one of the fights I saw, though he doesn't have a submission on his record. But I do like that he has gone 25 minutes, so I do like that. The reason why I said the betting line is off, not that I don't think Cosce should be the favorite from what I've seen, but there's so much limited film that I wouldn't feel confident making a bet on someone, especially at like Cosce's like negative 400 or something like that.
Yep.
So from what I've seen of Palatnikov, nothing really stands out to me. And at least what I've seen of Cosce is very aggressive, hits very hard. So I'm going to go based off what I've seen, and I'm going to go with Cosce. I'm going to go with his history of him knocking guys out quick. So I'm going to say he lands a shot. I think he ends it early, and I'm going to give him a first-round knockout.
Outstanding. I'm with you on literally everything you just said there, so I won't beat any of it to death. Two guys that there's not a whole lot of tape to go on, but Cosce's power, aggression, just everything he throws is with murderous intent. And thus far, it's been enough. You'll always see those guys, they'll hit a wall at some point where somebody is experienced and defensively sound enough, or they themselves are a good enough athlete that doesn't work anymore. And they run into the wall that Johnny Walker has. This is not going to be that wall for Cosce. Based on what little I've seen of the two of them, I think Cosce is going to just be a shockingly stronger, faster, and more explosive athlete. And I also have him catching Palatnikov with something in the first round and knocking him out. Second fight on the prelims is a middleweight scrap between Kyle Daukaus and the debuting Dustin Stoltzfus. Daukaus is 9-1 overall. He is 0-1 in the UFC, having made his debut back in June. That was a decision win and a pretty good fight against Brendan Allen, who's also a pretty well-regarded prospect. Before that, he was a regular in the Northeast scene. He has appearances in Cage Fury Fighting Championships, Ring of Combat. He was a winner on Dana White's Contender Series last summer, won a decision there, but did not get the immediate offer of a contract. He has made it here, and he will attempt to right the ship against the debuting Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus is an American fighting out of Germany. He appeared on Dana White's Contender Series in August, and he is one of two fighters on this card who made me cringe by showing me people's arms going on backwards or legs going on backwards in their most recent appearance. Daukaus is a healthy favorite here. He's sitting around minus 275 right now, where you can get Stoltzfus around plus 230 or plus 240. Keith Schillen, are those odds in keeping with how the fight actually looks to you?
No, I think it's a little wide. I think that's going to be a theme of the night, that the betting lines are much wider than I expect. The other theme, as we should mention, is the battle of the Contender Series veterans. In this one, there is, I just looked, there's 6 Contender Series veterans on this card, so we're going to say Contender Series a lot. I'll start with Daukaus. Southpaw, he really stalks his prey. He is a very technically sound striker, much different than his brother. His brother's more of a brawler. He's very technically sound. He stays so relaxed and so comfortable, which I love. He does drop his hands, which I don't like, and that actually led him to be rocked several times. But he's fought some good competition already, even though he's only making his second appearance in UFC. Fast jab, very accurate left hand. He kind of just touches until an opening is there. Then he unloads power shots, which I absolutely love. That really keeps his cardio going. Deceiving power, he, I think by his physique, because he's kind of like long and lengthy guy, you don't think of a, big cracker, but he does sit on his punches and delivers some good power. Nice long kick. He uses that kick to the body of orthodox fighters, meaning that he's a southpaw. You kind of blast that. Very good grappler too. He's a submission threat. I mean, 8 of his 9 wins, 8 of them have been submission. His only fight that he didn't get a submission was the one on the Contender Series against Mike Lombardo, which is one of those ones where, Dana doesn't give him a contract because he didn't get a submission. You're like, dude, he's got 9 fights and 8 of them have been ended by, stoppage. He, the submissions he likes to go, he likes to attack the head. So you look at your guillotines, your Darce chokes. He will lose a position going for a sub, and his get-up game kind of sucks. If he gets on bottom, he struggles to get up, and we saw that in the Brandon Allen fight. That was a difference fight. Brandon Allen, top control, and absolutely brutal Brandon Allen type ground and pound. Move on to Stoltzfus. I like Stoltzfus too. I liked him on the Contender Series. He's well-rounded. He switches stances. He can be a little gun-shy at times, kind of looking for the perfect strike. But he does that because he has some decent power, sits on his punches. He's got a really good slip and rip right hand. And he whips that right hand. It really is his go-to punch. Occasional spinning attack, pretty good leg kicks. He's a good wrestler, but he's a really good just a submission threat. He's got 7 wins by submission, as you mentioned, he like break guys' arms. He has multiple submissions by different moves. Like he's got a knee bar, a twister on his record. So you got to like that. And he's also good at scrambling. He's good at getting back up. So as a prediction, I really like Daukaus as a fighter, but I really don't like his fight IQ. And what I mean by that, the one that really jumped out to me is the Brandon Allen fight. If he just stood up with Brandon Allen and stopped initiating grappling, he was going to win that fight. Like he was battering Brandon Allen on the feet. But like there's something in him that says like I have to grapple. Like I think it's like I don't want to just be a kickboxer. I want to be a full mixed martial artist. So he like needed to go to grappling too when he shouldn't have because he was losing the grappling but winning the striking. I feel like he could be the better grappler than Stoltzfus. It could at least be equal, but I know he's the better striker. If he can keep this on the feet, he should win. I just don't know if he will do that. As far as a prediction, who I'm going to take against my better judgment, being that I'm worried about Daukaus' game plan. He is the more skilled fighter, and I like him, in the long run. I think he has a better future. So I will take him to kind of batter Daukaus on the feet. I think he will drop him with a shot and then maybe look for a submission. I don't think he gets submission. I think he might just kind of ground and pound him and win. So I'm going to take Daukaus. I'll take him. I'm going to say, I'll say second round TKO by ground and pound.
Outstanding. I see a lot of the same dynamics there that you do. It's interesting that you brought up the question of Daukaus's strategy, his fight IQ, because I have a little bit of the same concern about Stoltzfus. He is an aggressive guy on the ground, definitely looking for the submission. And, given the limited amount of video I've been able to see on him, maybe a little overwillingness to be in the scrambles down there and looking for submission over position. I think if he spends too much time down there, that's going to be danger zone for him against Daukaus. Daukaus is a serious step up from anyone Stoltzfus has fought before. Like, I think Stoltzfus' best win so far is probably Jonas Bilstein, who washed out of the UFC. So give me Daukaus. I'm going to take him by submission in the second round. I think he's going to sting Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus isn't going to like what he's getting. Maybe, shoot, scramble ensues, and we either get Daukaus' sixth Bravo choke, or maybe he takes us back and gets his third rear naked. That brings us to the third fight on the UFC 255 prelims, where UFC veteran Alan Jouban will welcome the debuting Jared Gooden to the octagon. Jouban is 16-7 overall, 7-5 in the UFC. He is 37 years old. Gooden is 17-4 overall. He is, as stated, making his UFC debut, having spent some time in a lot of the usual suspect feeder leagues for the UFC, Titan Fighting Championship, LFA. But he is stepping up now, the 26-year-old from Atlanta, Georgia. He is just a slight underdog. You can get him around plus 120 right now, where Jouban is around minus 140 or minus 150. I think this one comes down to whether you believe in Alan Jouban still. He is 37 years old, and for me, the charm of Alan Jouban is that he is an incredibly good-looking man. He is a literal magazine model who sells, cologne and slacks and stuff like that, who fights as though he does not give a single solitary damn about his face. He's a wild man. He never met a brawl he didn't like, but as you get into your late 30s, as you push towards 40, as you continue to fight in a division which by the eyeball test must be quite a weight cut, the question always remains: will your stamina hold up? Will your chin hold up? Because that is what Alan Jouban's game runs on. It's not to say he doesn't have a variety of tools. I mean, he has a pretty diverse striking game. It's just more that he is willing to get into it and go toe-to-toe, sometimes with less skilled strikers than himself. The man loves to scrap. He is 1-3 in his last 4, but the last one, the split decision loss to Dwight Grant back at UFC 236 last year, It was a split decision loss. He was incensed about it. Actually made the front page of Sherdog just calling out the refs who'd called it against him. And I'm slightly inclined to agree with him. I gave him that fight as well. So as far as I'm concerned, he should be on a 2-fight winning streak right now. He's taking on someone in Gooden that I think if you ran this fight even a year from now, I would handily favor Gooden in. But as I said, it comes down to whether you believe Alan Jouban has enough Jouban left in the tank to keep doing his thing. I do think he does. I don't know if we see a finish here, but I think Jouban is going to win this one just after winning 2 out of 3 rounds, probably the first 2. He tends to be a pretty sharp starter. Am I crazy, Keith?
Well, no, absolutely not. I like the betting lines of this. It's very close. Like, I was okay with either fighter being the favorite. I just think this is one of the hardest ones to pick, and I think you hit it right on the head. It's hard to pick because what do we have in Alan Jouban? He's 38 years old, and he hasn't fought in 19 months. I mean, he's at the age where you expect to decline. He fights in one of the weight classes. This is not heavyweight where 38 is still young. I actually agree with you on the Dwight Grant. I scored it 29-28 for Jouban. That was 19 months ago. I just looked on MMA decisions. I scored it 19 months ago for Jouban. I rewatched it this week. I scored it again for Jouban. Very close fight, though. You said Jouban likes a brawl. And I agree to a sense. It really depends on who he's fighting. Because a brawl to me is bad Jouban. Because, he brawled with Nico Price. That didn't work out for him. He brawled with Bilal Muhammad, and it did work out good for him. But he played it smart. Like, he's got enough skills that he can play smart. You think about, like, the Mike Perry fight. He did not brawl with Mike Perry. He did not brawl with Dwight Grant, even though it didn't work out for him. But I think he actually was a little gun-shy in the Dwight Grant fight, and that's probably why he might have not got the decision. I think he's pretty intelligent. I think he's a technically sound striker. He definitely likes a counter strike. So if your opponent's very aggressive on him, that might draw out the brawl from him. He's a southpaw, which is good. He uses good movement, cuts angles well, good vision, uses feints well to draw out his opponent's strikes. So good straight punches. Not one reason why he probably shouldn't get in brawls is he doesn't have one punch knockout. That's not Alan Jouban's game. He's a guy that should jab, move, and throw a lot of kicks. When he throws kicks to the body, kicks to the legs, that's good Alan Jouban. He can sneak in a takedown. I think he's a very underrated grappler. Though he doesn't use it enough. It's something he should use, especially as he gets older and you start slowing down the reflexes. You should become a lot more grappling heavy. If you can sustain that cardio, though, because that's kind of like the balance. Like, the more grappling heavy you have the cardio where you can do that. I don't know. But it will protect your chin. Jaron Gooden, I think, is a really good addition to the UFC roster. As you mentioned, he's 26 years old, so he's kind of just entering his prime. He's got a lot of experience. He's got 21 professional fights. He's a big dude for the weight class. He's shredded. Everything's short with him, short punches. We talked about K.S. Williams with his short punches the other day with his knockouts. Not a lot of tells. He just kind of throws them straight down the pipe. I've heard people call him a knockout artist, and I don't think he is. I think it's like almost the opposite. He just kind of just touches, and everything comes off for jab. Like, I actually think he's more of a technically sound fighter than a knockout artist. I actually think that he loses power because he throws a lot of arm punches. He does do well. Like, he's a range striker. That's really what he is. I like that he targets the body, and I think that's what you get with someone who's got 21 fights under his belt. He does throw the lead rear uppercut, which I hate, which will get him knocked out against someone like Vicente Luque or Jeff Neal will put him to sleep if he tries something like that. He doesn't handle pressure well. He likes to be the one kind of coming forward, which won't be that big of a deal going against someone like Alan Jouban. Because Alan Jouban, he's not a very explosive guy. Gooden is a decent wrestler and some great ground and pound. So to basically this big long run on who I pick, like I said, this is one of the hardest picks. I wonder how committed Jouban is to the fight game as a fighter. I mean, he has his podcast. He has, he's working the desk. He has modeling. Like, he has other things where he could be very successful, and he's good at. Gooden, he's young. He's been way more active. So that is why I'm worried about taking Jouban. But I am going to take him just based off what I've seen. I don't want to just simply, take away from Jouban because I haven't seen him. From one, going just strictly off their last fights, I still think Jouban's the better fighter. So I think he will land shots from range, especially his kicks. And I think he wins a very close decision. And maybe in the post-fight, he'll thank the judges this time.
All right, that's it for the early prelims. So now we move over to the middle prelims, the late prelims. Who knows? At any rate, it's still welterweights. It is UFC veteran Nicolas Dalby taking on late replacement Daniel Rodriguez, who steps in for the other Cosce brother, Ariane Cosce. Nicolas Dalby, 18-3-1 with 2 no contests. And if you are paying close attention, that is a record that changed today on Wednesday night as we record this. Jesse Ronson, who beat Dalby just earlier this year, tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, a steroid in particular, and just accepted a 20-month suspension, and that fight has been overturned to a no contest. So Dalby is now 18-3-1 with 2 no contests. He is 2-2-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is 36 years old. He hails, of course, from Denmark, and he will be taking on Daniel Rodriguez, who he's not exactly Chaos Williams or Hamzat Chimaev or Joaquin Buckley, but he has come basically out of nowhere to go 3-0 in the UFC this year and has a chance to become, I believe, just the second fighter to win his first 4 fights in the UFC in 2020. He is 33 years old. He is a product of Dana White's Contender Series, but another one who did not receive an immediate invitation. But nonetheless, he's here now. He made the best of a short notice debut, taking out Tim Means in the second round of their fight, and has beaten Gabriel Green and Dwight Grant since then. He steps in for the other Cosce brother, Ariane, who was scheduled to fight Dalby, but pulled out with an unspecified injury. But just quick question off the top of your head. If it were Cosce against Dalby tonight, who would you have, Keith?
Tough call because Dalby obviously is a good veteran. But I like the upside of Cosce, so I probably would have leaned towards Cosce. But if they do fight in the future and I change my opinion, don't hold this against me because I didn't do tape study for this. I did tape study for Rodriguez. But, yeah, that would have been a fun fight.
Yes. This one should be fun as well. But speaking of lean, this is a fairly uncommon example of a fighter coming in as a late replacement and being a healthy favorite. Right now, Rodriguez is sitting around -300, -310, where you can get Dalby on the comeback around +250. Is there any value there, or is Rodriguez rightfully a 3-1 favorite here?
No, I definitely don't think he should be 3-1. Should he be a favorite? Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I'm taking Rodriguez to win, but I think he should be more favored, like -220. But I mean, Dalby's a crafty veteran. He's fought some really good guys. I'll start with Dalby. He switches stances a lot, but he's very aggressive. Like, he comes hard, he hits hard. He's willing to eat a punch to land a punch. He's always thinking offense in that kind of he likes to walk through punches. He lacks a head movement. But if he can get in his range, he's so physically strong, he can hurt you. But the best thing is, I think, is his kicks. He throws a lot of kicks. He has that Holly Holmes side kick thing going that I like. But he's well rounded. He can wrestle too. Like, he's not a Gracie on the ground, but he's got decent entries. He's strong, so if he gets on your hips, he's gonna lock his hands, he's gonna lift you up and slam you. And pretty good ground control. He can sub you. Moving over to Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a guy, really good addition to UFC. I wasn't, really high on him coming in, but he's really changed my opinion. Southpaw, pressure boxer, fast hands. He cracks people. I mean, you just ask Tim Means, ask Dwight Grant how hard he hits. He's got a long jab. His left hook was crushing Tim Means. He's for a guy who's like known for his power, he's pretty technically sound too. He does need to tighten up his loop and punches a little bit. He does loop a little bit. He's got to tighten that up, especially as he climbs up the rankings, of which if he wins again, he might get a top 15 opponent next. Sneaky takedowns. Like, he's not a bad ground guy. Solid takedown defense. If you make a mistake he can submit you. I think he's got 4 submission wins on his record, including that guillotine on 10 means. So he's well rounded. Between his power and Dalby's lack of defense, I expect him to get cracked. I think this is going to be a really fun fight as the last. I think we're going to have a brawl. I almost picked this as my fight of the night. I just think it won't last long enough. So give me Rodriguez. I'm going to take him win by second round knockout in a really fun back and forth affair.
Fantastic. I see a lot of the same things that you're mentioning here. I also see a few parallels between Dalby and Alan Jouban, whom we just talked about. Their actual fight styles are in no way similar. They themselves are not similar, but they're two guys who are pretty aggressive and have gotten by on chin and durability and heart for a long time and are now pushing into their late 30s. Dalby was quietly one of the best stories in MMA last year. You know, he's a guy who had washed out of the UFC on the back of a couple of losses, went through admitted problems with depression and alcohol, then fought his way back to the UFC through one of the most sensational fights to take place in Europe that year, as he and Ross Houston just drenched the Cage Warriors canvas in blood to the point that it was declared a no contest just because the surface was unsafe to fight on. But makes it back to the UFC, beats Cowboy Oliveira in front of a hometown crowd, and just, it was like a Hollywood story. Then it all came crashing down when he got tapped out in pretty depressing fashion by Ronson back in July. Now that's overturned, so I don't know if it's Hollywood anymore. Now it's, maybe just, they're doing a TV adaptation of his story, but I don't like the next chapter of this story to be very happy. He's a guy who you've already talked about, the head movement. Even when he's winning, he's a pretty hittable guy. Rodriguez is just a lead-fisted dude. It doesn't look like he's swinging with murderous intent every time, but just all of his shots seem to have a lot of lead in them. I don't like Dalby to make it through that, and I think this is going to look bad for him. I expect him to lose by first round TKO. We move on through the prelims to our first flyweight bout of the evening. It is Antonina Shevchenko against Ariane Lipski. Shevchenko, the 35-year-old older sister of the UFC flyweight champion, is 8-2 overall, 2-2 in the UFC since making her way through the Contender Series. She is taking on former KSW champ Lipski, who is 13-5 overall, also 2-2 in the UFC, and is just 26 years old. Odds are fairly close. Shevchenko sitting around minus 150, minus 160. Lipski, you can get her around plus 130 right now. You'll be listening to this through audio, but I'm looking at Keith right now, and he is shaking his head. So I have the feeling we might be hearing, if not his upset special of the night, at least a prediction of an upset. What do you got for me, Keith?
Well, I'm shaking my head because this is the fight I've been dreading ever since we decided we're going to make predictions, simply because I just hate taking Shevchenko and Antonina Shevchenko's fights. I hate picking her. A couple of weeks ago, we made predictions on Stefan Struve versus Tai Tuivasa, and I said instantly, I know I got this wrong. This is going to be the same. I'm going to get this fight wrong. So I'll start with Shevchenko. Incredible striker, but so one-dimensional. She is one of the she might be the best striker in the women's division, including her sister. Straight striking, she's incredible. Pressure striker, I should say. Her accuracy is tremendous. She darts in and out of range with a combination and lands easily. Her straight left right hook combo is fantastic. She has a great jab, kicks everywhere. She's not bad in the clinch either. She can land knees and elbows there because she's, taller woman. But her wrestling is nothing short of terrible. I mean, she made Katlyn Chookagian look like Jordan Burroughs. She can't get off from the bottom at all. And what's surprising about it, this is a girl who comes from a judo background. She grew up practicing judo. It's how could it be that bad? Did you ever get past white belt? Move over to Lipski. Lipski's young. She's still only 26 years old. As you mentioned, the former KSW champion. So she has a lot of, credentials coming in. She's a good striker herself. She's a pressure striker herself. She's more of a volume striker. She'll just beat you. With her output. Decent power, solid kicks. She's a weak offensive wrestler, but she is a submission threat. So, man, if Lipski turns this into a wrestling match, she easily wins, even though I don't think she's that good of a wrestler. However, I don't know if she will. I don't know if she has that ego. Like Katlyn Chookagian is known for striking. She went right to the wrestling. She didn't have the ego. Does Lipski have that ego? I think she might struggle getting this fight to the ground. I think Shevchenko just lands, and I think she picks her pot. So I'm taking Shevchenko by unanimous decision, but instantly I already regret that pick.
Well, we do have some dissension.
There you go. Of course. You got it right. I got it wrong.
I feel in some ways, I feel a lot of what you're putting down here, but the extent to which Antonina Shevchenko is the worst wrestler in the UFC, it can't be overstated. I mean, she made Roxanne Modafferi look like Curtis Blades. Like it's on the books as a split decision for Modafferi, and that is low key just one of the worst cases of officiating or of judging. Modafferi won all 3 rounds. And she spent a good portion of all 3 rounds sitting on Shevchenko's chest and just punching the sides of her head. It was a bit of a moral victory that Shevchenko made it out of the fight without getting choked. Both of these are fighters who you can kind of point to it broadly and say, oh, they've beaten the not so good fighters and they've lost to the good ones. But it feels to me like Lipski is kind of pulling out of what was a very disappointing initial run in the UFC, whereas it looks to me like Shevchenko is what she is. I agree with you that she is a fantastic technical striker. Just, all of her techniques are beautiful, but she doesn't have the same pop athletically that her younger sister does. It honestly reminds me a bit of when Dwayne Ludwig was in his prime as a fighter and would just still get outstruck by guys who maybe weren't as technically sound, but just had faster hands and feet. I'll just never forget him getting busted up by Paul Daly. That's what Shevchenko feels like to me. Against the right opponent, she can just put on a striking clinic, but against the wrong opponent, the fights are just kind of dreadful, and fighters who aren't as good a striker as she is kind of are able to stay in it. And against the wrong kind of opponent, she puts on a wrestling clinic for the other person. I do have enough faith in Lipski to take the easy road here. Give me Lipski by decision.
Yeah. The most frustrating thing about Antonina's wrestling, or lack of wrestling, is that her sister is a fantastic wrestler.
It's really weird, man.
Yeah, like her sister's not even she's not an average, she's known for a striking, but she's average, Amanda Nunes is obviously well-rounded, but she's not this great wrestler. Valentina's great trips, great take. You'd see her judo background. You don't see it in Antonina. It's really frustrating.
Next up at UFC 255, we have middleweights as Joaquin Buckley, the newest member of the UFC's Forever Highlight Reel, takes on Jordan Wright. Buckley, the 26-year-old, is 1-1 in the UFC. He's also spent a good amount of time in Bellator. Of course, lost his UFC debut to Kevin Holland. And then last month at UFC Fight Night, Moraes versus Sandhagen, destroyed Impa Kasanganay with a spinning back kick that is one for the ages. I do not know how long he will be in the UFC, but he will be on the UFC's sizzle reel for as long as there is an octagon being set up in any city anywhere in the world. He takes on Jordan Wright. Wright is 29. He won his first fight in the UFC over Ike Villanueva, and that was actually at light heavyweight. He now has a chance to step to his preferred weight class, middleweight. Wright is still technically undefeated. He is 11-0 officially. However, he has one no contest on his record. But Keith, our in-house Dana White's Contender Series expert, will be quick to remind you that no contest is actually him getting dusted in 40 seconds by Anthony Hernandez. But after that, Hernandez ended up testing positive for that notorious helper of fast twitch reflexes, marijuana. So Jordan Wright still technically undefeated, but apparently the odds makers have seen that fight because Buckley is a minus 265 favorite, while Wright is coming in right around plus 225 or 230. Does Wright get smoked again? Keith Schillen.
Man, so I hate doing this. Like, I hate seeing in a stereotype seeing a black guy, like, he's so explosive, but it actually fits with Buckley. He's insanely athletic, insanely explosive, southpaw. What I like about when he explodes is he's not a Tyron Woodley, like one huge shot explosive. He explodes with output. I mean, he came right after Impa Kasaganai, throwing combinations. He's got tight hooks behind his kind of bob and weave style, kind of gets him in range to unload big combinations. He does well to hide his chin behind. He tucks his chin and hides behind his shoulders, keeps his shoulders high in that bob and weave. He loves his like straight left from the power, from the power side, straight left. Not bad like wrestler either. He'll take his opponent down, back on the feet, good kicks, hard kicks. He doesn't really check him. If he gets in your hips, clinch takedowns, hard ground and pound. I'm worried about his cardio because he throws everything so hard, but I haven't seen him gas out yet. Move with Jordan Wright, as you mentioned, he did get knocked out. He kind of feasted on low-level competition, kept cutting his way into the UFC before the Contender Series. Even his one fight in the UFC was Ike Villanueva, as you mentioned, like taken on very short notice. That's not that impressive. He is big for the weight class. He's a big guy. He comes from like a karate background, keeps his hands low, lots of kicks, loves the spinning attacks. Chin might be an issue as he's faced, in my opinion, probably one UFC level guy and he was easily knocked out. He's not a big puncher himself. He doesn't have a lot of power. His best area is probably his plum clinch, the Muay Thai plum clinch. He's pretty good in there. Because he's got pretty good height and he throws those knees right up the middle. Okay wrestler, decent submission threat. Who am I taking? I'm taking Buckley. I think this is a mismatch, and I'm trying to like pump the brakes on Buckley just because of that knockout. Like don't get too high on him because of this crazy knockout, but he's just too fast. Hits too hard for Wright. I think he blasts him right in the first round, and I think even though he had this insane knockout, add on another back-to-back, like I think it's gonna be a brutal knockout, and I think the buzz around this guy's gonna be going through the roof, and then his next fight will be like a co-main event or a top 15 guy. Like it's gonna be something where he just jumps so high getting his next match.
I'm with you. No spoilers. I have Buckley by first round knockout in this one as well. And I also had that sensation of needing to, tap the brakes just because he did something once doesn't mean he'll do it every time. But Wright is exactly the kind of fighter that it's a setup for him to knock somebody's block off. I figured I had the book on Buckley going into his last fight in Bellator against Logan Storley, who is still one of the prospects in the sport that I'm highest on, regardless of his recent loss. I watched his fights leading up to that, and then obviously I watched the Storley fight, and he got completely big brothered. He just had no ability to stop Storley's takedown. I think part of the problem was his insistence on cutting to 170. He looks like a different man at 185. Just better cardio, plenty of power. It's not as though he's moved up and I can't knock people out anymore. That is manifestly not true. So he's a whole different fighter at 185. I don't have a good handle on what his ceiling is yet, but his floor is above Jordan Wright's head. He's gonna knock his block off. I don't know if it'll be another knockout of the year contender, but I think he just catches him with something and then starts the ball rolling downhill, and this is over in the first round knockout. That brings us to the featured prelim of UFC 255, and we are once again in the flyweight division, and this one is a burner. In an example of all the moving parts that go into putting together cards in the era of COVID-19. When Alex Perez got the call to move up to the main event, when one of the fighters was forced to pull out, Moreno was looking for an opponent. They bring in Royval, and all of a sudden we have what, in fans' opinion, appears to be a front runner for fight of the night. Moreno is 17-5-1, 26 years old. He is 6-2-1 in the UFC. He's taking on Royval, who is 12-4 overall, 28 years old, 2-0 in the UFC. Moreno is a moderate favorite, sitting around minus 190 right now, whereas Royval is available around plus 165. Keith Schillen, is this a front runner for fight of the night in your mind, and who do you have winning?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Is it a front runner? I'm going to say no, simply because it's on the prelims, and the UFC kind of like the higher up the card, the more weight that kind of gets. But I'm going to pick it as my fight of the night anyways. I love this fight. I think both guys are really, really good. I'll start with Moreno. Brandon Moreno, he could have got the call to the title fight over Perez. I mean, he was higher ranked than him. I don't really know why they picked Perez. Maybe it was the Contender Series connection. But, I mean, you could have made an argument for Moreno to get the title shot instead of. So I say that even though I actually thought Moreno should have lost his last fight against Formiga. It was a fantastic fight, but I actually thought Formiga won that one. But Moreno, he's well-rounded, very good boxer, fast hands. I love his, he sets up his shots with his shoulder rolls. He kind of feints with his shoulder rolls. He also has a Baba weave style similar to Joaquin Buckley, who we just mentioned. He sits on his punches. He has a sneaky high kick. He'll throw a combination and end it with that high kick, similar to what Robert Whitaker hit on Jared Cannonier. His jab has just come so far. He worked Kai Kara-France with just his jab, just worked him up with it. He mixes in his punches and takedowns well. He is a little open to leg kicks, but I'm starting to think maybe I say that about every fighter. Just I don't know, just something I picked up. Great in scrambles, good takedowns, hard to submit, hard to hold down. If you do get his back or something, he's got a Granby roll. He always Granbys and finds ways out. Move over to Brandon Royval, Factory X guy. So athletic, southpaw, constant pressure, high volume, long and lengthy. Oh, he has the long jab, but he uses his length not how you expect. You expect him to try to keep distance. He does the opposite. He actually closes the distance with his length. And what I mean by that is he'll follow a jab to close the distance, and he has such long legs that he can make up the ground in his opponent because he likes the in-close clincher where he can throw his knees up the middle, kicks everywhere. He loves flashy stuff. He has so much confidence. He'll throw a flying knee. He'll throw a spinning attack. Great step-in knees. The negatives are his defensive flaws, keeps his hands low, loses power because he kind of throws from his hips. He was dropped by Kara-France because he keeps his chin high, and he doesn't check leg kicks, which is, I say that about everybody. He is a wizard on the ground, though. He's very flexible. He can catch submissions. He can catch subs and scrambles. He has a very funk style to his game. If people who follow the collegiate wrestling stuff know what I mean, but he's always keeping his hips moving. If you don't really get what I'm saying by that, it's similar to when you see Tim Elliott in scrambles, or actually his first opponent in the UFC. Which that fight was so fun because the hips are always moving. That's a funk style of wrestling. He's a weak defensive wrestler, but I think there's two reasons for that. One, he's so comfortable if he gets taken down, but also he will jump on a guillotine and make it even easier. So I love this fight. This is the fight that I probably spent the most time on tape study. And one thing I've said this before, before I do tape study, I write down, okay, in a vacuum, these are the guys I'm taking. Change my mind in the tape study. There's been two fights that I jump sides, and this is actually one of the ones that I jump sides during my tape study. I'm actually going with the upset here, and I'm taking Brandon Royval. His length, those step-in knees, he seems like he's going to land either the front kick down the middle or step-in knee, plus the submission threat. I just think he has so many avenues. So this is my first upset, but this is not my upset of the night, but this is my first upset I'm taking on the card. I'm taking Brandon Royval, and I think if he wins this fight, I think he's actually going to take on the winner of the main event for the title.
I'm glad you brought that up because, as I said off the top, not only are there 5 flyweight fights on this card, but all except for the Antonina Shevchenko versus Ariane Lipski one have pretty immediate title implications. Like, this one might very well determine the next challenger, whereas the one we'll talk about in a little while here at least put somebody on the doorstep. I hear everything you're putting out here, but we are going to have more dissension. I have Moreno in this one. I just really believe in the guy since he's come back. He's another fighter that I thought the book was written on him when he was kind of like flushed with the exodus of the flyweight division. He was on the back of 2 losses at that point. He's come back and he's looked different. He's still a wild man. Like he is a wild, exciting fighter to watch both on the feet and on the ground. Just it feels very much like off the cuff creativity going on, even though it's probably the result of, many hours of fighting that way in the gym. Yeah, I also found the win over Formiga like a little iffy, but on the flip side, I thought his split draw against Askarov was a pretty clear victory for him. So it comes out in the wash. He's at least been there in his last 3 fights in the UFC against some solid competition. Like Formiga, obviously, had been very recently a top 5 flyweight. Askarov is still a very, very promising prospect. I think he's looked better against the highest of high-level competition that both guys have taken on. I have Moreno to weather some danger because he weathers danger in all of his fights, but to win a very entertaining decision over Brandon Royval. And this will deserve to be fight of the night, but it won't be because that's how this works. And with that, we enter the pay-per-view main card of UFC 255 with the heaviest fight on the card, featuring the oldest fighter on the card. It is Mauricio Shogun Rua against Paul the Bear Jew Craig. Rua is 27-11-1 in his lengthy and storied career. He's 11-9-1 in the UFC. He will be 39 years old in about a week, and he is rematching a recent split draw with Craig. Craig, the 32-year-old Scot, is 13-4-1 overall. He is 6-4-1 in the UFC. Craig is a slight favorite right now, sitting around -170, where you can get Shogun at +150. I'll just go on record as saying that this fight does not make a lick of sense. This is not a term I use loosely or easily or often, but Shogun Rua is a living legend. He's pushing 39 at this point. He has nothing else to prove. He owes nothing to anybody other than he owes himself and his family the best living he can make for them and the best future he can buy for them. But at approaching 39, I don't know if this is his last fight or he has 3 more fights. But this is legacy mode. Even though he is kind of creeping around the edges of the light heavyweight top 15 right now, just because the division is so depleted, he hasn't had the look of a fighter who has another title run in him. This is his victory lap. These are his legacy fights. And this one is going to be a rematch of what was not a real fun fight to start with. And even if he just blows him out of his sneakers, when we're talking about Shogun Rua 20 years from now, we're not going to be like, hey, you remember when he knocked out Paul Craig in that second to last or third to last fight? I don't see the purpose for it. And frankly, I don't see the purpose for it from the other side of the coin either. I don't know how much it does for Craig other than being able to tell his grandkids that he fought one of the greatest fighters of all time twice. Having said that, I do have Shogun in this one. I don't know if he will still be the underdog by the time they step into the cage, but assuming he is, this is my upset special because I actually feel pretty strongly about this one. Craig has carved out an impressive career by doing what Paul Craig does. He is a big light heavyweight, but for most of that time, he presents as kind of a slow-paced, slow-footed kickboxer, and his trademark move is getting whooped on for several rounds before submitting somebody. As slowed as he is, Shogun Rua is still a much, much, much better striker than Paul Craig. So for as long as this stays on the feet, he should mark him up. He still has excellent kicks. He still has crazy power in his hands. For a guy who came out of shoot box, he's one of the more defensively sound shoot box like OGs, for whatever that means. So Paul Craig's avenues to victory here are suddenly being a better striker than he's ever been in his career, or pulling out a Hail Mary submission over Shogun Rua. And Shogun's ground game, unless he's dead exhausted, is one of the more underrated skill sets in mixed martial arts history. Craig's a tough guy. I don't think he's going to get finished, but give me Rua by a fairly one-sided decision in a not terribly fun fight to watch. What do you got, Keith?
So, man, that was fun. You got me excited about this fight somehow.
I just shit on it as hard as I could.
No, I know. I don't know why. It's like it got so bad that it actually started getting good to me. So you mentioned about the thing that actually the first thing you said that jumped out to me. You mentioned about Shogun being the oldest one on the card, and I kind of got sad for a second because oh, remember when it was the complete opposite? Remember when he showed up in Pride and he was the young 21-year-old and oh my God, who's this 21-year-old kid running through people? It's kind of sad. As far as legacy, I couldn't completely agree. This is nothing for Shogun's legacy. It actually hurts his legacy. I kind of wish we got to a point with certain fighters and we were like, okay, from this point on, they can continue to fight, but from this point on, we're not going to judge anything they do on their careers. I mean, BJ Penn would have been okay, he's fallen off. Stop right now. Nothing else matters. I kind of feel like we should have done that with Shogun 5 years ago. This is the rematch that nobody was calling for, but somehow we got it just because they had a draw. I will start with Shogun. I actually thought he lost his last fight to Nogueira. I thought Nogueira should have won that fight. He is insanely tough. No matter how bad he gets beat up, he does keep pressing forward. I'll give him that. I'm impressed with that. He still does have some power, but he has taken so much damage over the years. Besides the wars he's been in, you think about the wars with Dan Henderson, the wars with Nogueira. Besides all that, the injuries that have happened to him too. He's had devastating injuries. I mean, think about the Mark Homan arm break, the ACL tear, all these things. So he's taken so much damage. He is really slowed down. His hand speed is just not there anymore. He doesn't use his kicks as nearly as much as it was when he was in his prime. He's still tough to submit if you get him down. And if he ends up on top, which will likely happen considering Craig will pull guard, and Shogun will occasionally get a sneaky takedown himself. He does have some pretty good ground and pound still, though he's not a submission threat, though the commentary team will talk about him being a BJJ black belt. I think he's got one submission win on his entire career. He
knee-barred Kevin Randleman, and he might do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul Craig, you mentioned him being tall and big, and I was thinking this. I think he would be better if he went to heavyweight. I think he should. I'm going to disagree with you when you said Shogun is a much better striker than Paul Craig. This is not a compliment of Paul Craig. I'm just going to say this. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. You might have to edit this, but Paul Craig sucks. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I could change what I say if I'm not. But that says Shogun's done. I just don't trust him. And Paul Craig, when they were standing, was actually winning the stand-up in their first fight. In fact, he almost knocked him out in the first round. He unloaded this huge barrage. And if he had any power, I think he would have knocked Shogun out. He does keep his chin high in the air and he can get cracked. I still think his kicks are okay. He is a submission threat and he likes to sub people off his back, but he plays BJJ too much. He wants to, he gets into those, when you do BJJ in the gym and you're all right, I'll go on bottom now. He has terrible fight IQ. What I mean by this is he showed no urgency in that fight. When he was on bottom and he was not getting a submission in Shogun, he didn't try to get back up. In fact, in the third round, he shot in and pulled guard for no reason. I'm if this guy thinks he's Ryan Hall or something on the ground, and he's not. He's just an ordinary grappler, and he's a terrible offensive wrestler. So who do I think wins? So Craig was lucky to get the draw. I thought Shogun won the second and third round pretty convincingly. I'm okay with – okay,
I'll just jump in and say, well, you were talking about how he did have Shogun in quite a bit of trouble in the first round of their fight. The reason we even have this draw to talk about is because one of the judges gave Craig a 10-8 round in that first round.
Yeah. So I'm okay with that. Like, he did a lot that I'm okay with. I did not give it a 10-8 round, but I'm okay with a 10-8 round. But I'm still saying, like, he lost 2 out of the 3 rounds. So that's why I'm saying, like, he's lucky to get a draw. Though I scouted the fight for Shogun in the first round, I'm actually taking Craig. I think if he rewatches the film, I think he'll realize, like, wait a minute, I was winning the stand-up if I just don't grapple with this guy, don't pull guard. Like, I feel like Craig doesn't pull guard, he wins this fight. So I'm going to take Craig, and this is probably where our biggest disagreement is. Like, I think he's the better striker in this career at this point, which is really, really like this is why I want to see Shogun retire, because Shogun should not get outstruck by Paul Craig. And if he knocks out Paul Craig, I'll be like, all right, well, that's what I get. Like, I picked Paul Craig. But, like, I shouldn't even think about picking Paul Craig over a legend like Shogun. So I'll take Paul Craig. I'm taking first round knockout, but I hope I'm wrong. No, I don't have anything against Paul Craig, so not like I'm not rooting. I don't want to see Shogun get knocked out. So that's what I'm rooting for.
Well, we have disagreed on a couple of fights so far, but on other ones like Shevchenko versus Lipski and Moreno versus Royval, it sounds like we see the fight pretty similarly, but we just kind of differ on which route it'll take. Here, there's actual disagreement. Yeah. And seeing how we have recap shows scheduled for like half an hour after the main event ends, like if I develop sudden laryngitis, it's because you were right and Craig boxed Shogun up. So, you know, like don't let me lie to you. It'll just be me chickening out.
That just sounds weird to say, like Paul Craig outstriking Shogun. It just doesn't seem right.
It's depressing. Moving up the main card, we have yet another high stakes flyweight contest. Katlyn Chookagian taking on Cynthia Calvillo. Chookagian, the recent UFC title challenger, is 31 years old, 14-4 overall, 6-4 in the UFC. She is taking on Calvillo, who is 9-1-1 overall, 6-1-1 in the UFC, and has kind of been gradually morphing her way up to flyweight from strawweight, where she was a contender for a while. In her last fight, she took on Jessica Ai at flyweight. Before that, she fought Marina Rodriguez to a draw in a strawweight fight, for which Calvillo actually missed the weight limit, so she was basically halfway between both weight classes. Calvillo is a healthy favorite here, sitting around minus 250, where Chookagian is available around plus 210. Before we talk about the actual dynamic of the fight, I'm just going to say that this feels like a high-risk proposition for the UFC, because if there's a problem the UFC has right now with this division, it is a lack of credible immediate title challengers for Valentina Shevchenko. She's almost, well, I wouldn't even say almost. She is in that place where Chris Cyborg was 5 years ago, where it's almost like, oh my goodness, what are we going to feed this woman in another 3 or 4 months? Let's, like, who's won 2 fights in a row? You know, let's make a sizzle reel for them. And in light of that, Calvillo is someone who is stepping in, and whether she likes it or not, she's going to be in the title picture quick. And she's fighting someone who is an underdog here, but could beat her. And if she loses, it's a lose-lose situation for the UFC, because Katlyn Chookagian needs to do a lot before anybody is going to want to see her fight Valentina Shevchenko again. Yet she could completely throw a wrench into the works, because, like I say, whether Calvillo wins or loses tonight, if she wins her next 2 fights, she's probably in a title shot, and she might be the person who's getting a title shot. But we remember how Katlyn Chookagian boxed her up for 3 rounds just a year ago. So it's really just them taking a chance at kneecapping a title challenger in a division where they desperately need title challengers to be coming down the pike. Having said that, I do think Calvillo is going to win this one. I have waffled back and forth. She struck me as the kind of person that Chookagian might be able to make her long-range kickboxing thing work on. But then I saw the difficulty that Chookagian had keeping Jessica Andrade off her. And Calvillo is not Andrade, but she has a similar physicality and just brute strength to her. And I don't think Chookagian's going to be able to just long distance kickboxer for 3 rounds like she has, say, Antonina Shevchenko or Jennifer Maia. So I don't think she's going to finish her. But give me Cynthia Calvillo by a one-sided decision. Calvillo takes all 3 rounds, and it's just not a super exciting fight to watch because there's probably not going to be a finish. But Chookagian just can't keep Calvillo off her. Calvillo can get it to the ground if she wants, or can mash her in the clinch and against the cage if she wants, and wins all 3 rounds. What do you say, Keith?
Well, I want to talk about what you addressed to start. You talked about, the matchmaking being shaky. The Calvillo was going to fight Lauren Murphy. That fight made a lot more sense because now the winner is your title challenger. Mm-hmm. In the same sense, Katlyn Chookagian lost Jessica Andrade. It would have made a lot more sense if Jessica Andrade got this fight, because then same thing, the winner might get a title shot. You have a lot of Robert Whitaker, Jared Cannonier thing going on here where you could knock out the contender and then you already have someone that we saw get dominated. I'm going to say this right now, and the reason why I'd be worried, I know you just took Calvillo, but Calvillo should not be a negative 270 favorite over with Katlyn Chookagian at plus 230. Now, I'm looking at the line. The line started, Katlyn Chookagian was a plus 134 underdog. That seems like what it should be. Plus 230 underdog to me is insane. This fight should be close to a pick 'em. I'll start with Calvillo because she's, the fun toy right now in the division. She definitely has improved her stand-up over the years. She still a basic just boxer with a little bit of a high kick that she sneaks in. Does switch stances. Does well to keep her head off the center line, which I like. I understand you said that she has very physical in the grappling, not in the striking. She lacks power in her striking. Her striking really doesn't excite me at all. On the ground is, her forte, decent entries, does well, she doesn't blast through entries. They're not light and fast, but what she does is she gets on her opponent's hip. She does very well to drive through them and finish the takedown. Very slick back takes, good ground and pound. I definitely think she's strong, but I don't think she's just going to draw as strong. I mean, that's excuse me, that's the only girl in MMA that I don't know if anybody's pound for pound as strong as Jessica Andrade in the female division. And so I'm a little concerned that she's undersized. And then move that over to Katlyn Chookagian, and she's complete opposite. She's big. I mean, Katlyn Chookagian lost. It would make more sense to me if she went back to bantamweight because she's already lost the champion. She's long and lengthy, good movement, straight punches down the pipe, works behind a jab, high volume. But if we're being honest with her high volume, a lot of it's just that throwing to that open space where she kind of tries to trick the judges into making it, just looks better if you're throwing punches, the other person's not. I do like that karate kick that she does, a side kick that's similar to what Nicolas Dalby does. She was rocked by Jessica Andrade, which is not good, and this is a quick turnaround for someone to rock, but it was a body shot that rocked her. It wasn't like a headshot, so you feel a little bit better about that. She's strong in the clinch. She's strong in the clinch because of her length, because she's tall. I think she's an underrated grappler. She trains under Renzo Gracie and John Danaher, 2 legends of BJJ. She has sneaky takedowns herself, good top control. We saw it again, Shevchenko. I mean, she just swarmed her. A lot of that has to do with Shevchenko, but solid ground and pound. What I liked is how intelligent she was. Is that, and we talked about this earlier, she didn't have the ego. She went this is the area I'm better at. I'm going to go right to it, and I like that. So as far as the prediction goes, like I said, I can't believe Chookagian is a plus 220 underdog. I actually think she should be the slight favorite. So I think she uses a movement. We're going to disagree again. I actually think she does outstrike Calvillo from distance, and I think she has enough takedown defense to stop any of Calvillo's entries. I expect Calvillo to eventually get her down, but I think it's going to be a very close fight. But I'm going to take this Chookagian by decision. So that's another upset pick for me.
Fantastic. And one more case of dissension. After we were halfway through the prelims, I thought we were just going to agree all night. That wouldn't be very exciting.
I have a feeling we might not be done either.
Uh-oh.
Because I know you're taking. I know you're taking Jennifer Maia. So
Well, we'll get to that. Before that, we need to talk about one more fight. Let's talk about welterweights. Platinum Mike Perry versus Tim the Dirty Bird Means. Perry, the 29-year-old, 14-6 overall, 7-6 in the UFC, takes on Means, the veteran, 30-12-1 with one no contest in his career, 12-9 with one no contest in his UFC run. He is 36 years old. As of the time we're taping, Means is just a very slight underdog. He's at plus 130. Perry sitting around minus 150 as the favorite. First question out of the gate before we talk about kicking, punching, choking. In light of his litany of personal legal issues, erratic behavior, are you good with Mike Perry fighting for cash this weekend?
Well, man, that's a tough question because I have two parts pulling me. Part of me says like this is prize fighting. They're not supposed to be role models. You know, these guys punch each other in the face for a living. We don't expect them to be stand-up people. You said the litany of things. That's what gets me. Like there's multiple things going on with him. If it was just his ex-wife accusing him of domestic violence, that's terrible. Listen, I'm a police officer, so like I shouldn't even have to feel like I have to justify like saying this is terrible. Like I arrest people every day for domestic violence, so nobody's more against domestic violence than I am. But if it was just allegations from his wife, and one of those innocent to proven guilty, like he should be allowed to fight. Like we can't have someone not make a living because of allegations. But it's like it's A, B, C, D. I mean, we have video of him punching an old man. He has these weird tweets on Twitter. He has, he doesn't even have a corner man. He's got this new girlfriend as his corner man, and just like all these things added together, he's talked about that he's been honest, like he has mental issues. So no, like I don't think Mike Perry should be fighting, but I don't like Mike Perry. I'll just be honest, I don't like him as a person. I have no proof that he beats up his girlfriend or his ex-wife, but just a gut feeling, I believe her. Just from the things I've seen of this guy. Now, I'm not saying that this happened. I have no proof. But I want to keep saying that so no one says, "Oh, yeah." But just that gut feeling, me like, I was watching this week. I've been watching a documentary called "Dark Side of the Cage." It's a documentary on professional wrestlers, and like two of them I watched recently. One was on Chris Benoit. One was on Jimmy Snuka. Chris Benoit killed his wife and his kids. Jimmy Snuka was accused of killing his ex-girlfriend. Now, I am not saying Mike Perry is going to kill anybody. I'm not jumping to that, but I'm saying like these guys didn't, like Jimmy Snuka didn't just kill his girlfriend. Like watch this documentary and there was like signs beforehand about him short temper and instantly snapping and vice versa. Like there's signs of Mike Perry. There's signs of a bigger thing happening. So that's what really worries me about Mike Perry. And honestly, like, should he be taking more punches to the brain? I don't know, because he seems like he's got a lot of like screws loose in his brain.
All right. I mean, I will just chime in and say I agree. Like Keith and I do not agree on everything. We don't, and certainly we've not agreed on the outcomes of many of the last few fights we've talked about. But I am not saying that legally Mike Perry should not be allowed to fight. You know, as Keith said, he is innocent until proven guilty. I don't even know if I'm absolutely saying that the UFC should step in and forbid him from fighting. You know, they only make money if he fights. He only makes money if he fights. But whether you just think he's a terrible person or you think he is a person who needs help or what is most likely some combination of the two, it's not a good look. I don't know if he hit his ex-wife, but I have visual evidence that he hit some other people. And there's so much smoke around him right now, that it's hard not to believe that there is some fire. He is acting like somebody who needs to be in treatment or rehab not a cage, possibly picking up more CTE. I mean, you mentioned Benoit and Snuka. I don't know what kind of latent issues they might have had, but in both of their cases, their erratic, violent behavior is what we understand now to be one of the signal behaviors of severe CTE. And Perry is somebody who, when he first came along, he was brash and he was loud and he said some horrible things, but he's crossed over to where he appears to be doing horrible things, or even when he's doing nominally nice things, like just buying his brand new girlfriend a car out of nowhere, they seem to be the result of poor impulse control. So whether you, like I say, whether you think he's a problem or a person with problems, or what is most likely some combination of the two, getting punched in the head more does not seem to be the prescription for this to get better.
Yeah. Can I just jump back in for a second? You talked about him buying stuff for his girlfriend. Like, this is a guy who just recently was talking about not wanting to pay taxes and not understanding how taxes work and stuff like that. Like, this is not a guy who's financially, like, I mean, he might have money, but I'm saying he's not financially, like, stable. Like, you're not going to get your tax advice from Mike Perry. You're not going to trust him for your financial advice. And, he just, I don't know. This dude needs some help. Like you said, like, could he be a terrible person? Could he be just somebody needs help? Like, I think most of the time terrible people need help. Like, it's kind of, usually is not one or the other. It's usually like both, as you mentioned. And like, even think about, like, well, he wasn't doing as crazy stuff when he first came to UFC. He was still surrounding himself with some pretty terrible people. Like you take like his best buddy, Alex Nicholson. I don't think about his Mike Perry's first fight in the cage.
The first thing we knew about him.
Yeah, Alex Nicholson is cornering him and throwing out racist terms to his opponent. And then we had him get arrested. Alex Nicholson himself arrested for hitting Hannah Goldie at a gas station. Hannah Goldie, who's now in the UFC. I mean, like, just he's not surrounding himself with good role models. He's not, he's not hanging out with Joseph Benavidez and or Dustin Poirier, or like who's the good guys. Like, he's not hanging out with those guys.
Yeah, and now he's not hanging out with anybody, it looks like, because he has had no camp. Yeah. I mean, we could go on for a while like this, but let's veer over towards the fight. As of right now, Perry remains a slight favorite. I'll jump on this one.
Sure.
I think Means is getting to the end of the line. This is his 22nd fight in the UFC, I think. And yeah, I'd say back, 5 years ago, like late 2015, early 2016, like right after he lost to Matt Brown, I was like, this is the kind of guy that is just going to rack up 30 fights in the UFC. He'll pick up some post-fight bonuses, pick up some prizes along the way. Probably never be a title contender, but he's just that kind of tough, gritty guy. I mean, the Dirty Bird is the best nickname for him. But it's coming to the end of the line. He's still beating people, but Laureano Staropoli is a borderline UFC level fighter, and his last win before that was Thiago Alves, who was is even more shot. And he's to the point now where he used to be a tough out. It used to be tough to finish this guy, but he's getting finished now, and he's getting finished by people that I think he would have beat the brakes off 5 or 6 years ago. He doesn't have a whole lot left. So when I say I'm picking him in this fight, it is a referendum on how little I believe in Perry. I mean, if you look at Perry's last few fights, yeah, he got beat by Jeff Neal and Vicente Luque, but they are much better fighters than him under the best of circumstances. And Luque was maybe the best style matchup for Perry of any top 20 fighter, because Luque is a guy who is willing to brawl to his detriment above, almost any other fighter I can think of. Neal is more the example of what it's going to look like when Perry fights contender level fighters. He beat Mickey Gall, but that was one of those fights that left me feeling worse about both fighters, because my thought was a fighter who was still a serious UFC level fighter, knocks Mickey Gall into the third row of seats. Perry didn't do that. The only reason he beat Gall is just because Gall is one of the most minus athletes in the UFC, if he is even still in the UFC, whereas Perry always will be a very strong, quick, explosive guy. And I think that was pretty much the difference. I mean, even in terms of like the way their striking looked technically, Gall like looked sharper. Just Perry landed harder.
He did.
If that's the version of Mike Perry that walks in against Tim Means, I think Means has got enough in the tank to win a decision, and I think he will. There's no indication that Perry is going to be better than he was in June. Everything we've seen since then indicates that he will be less well prepared. He will have had like less quality sparring, less quality instruction, less quality attention to his diet and cardio. And so, yeah, give me Means.
Man, I loved your breakdown on this. So it really comes down to like who has more left. Do you think Perry has more left? Do you have Means has more left? So the way I usually, start these breakdowns, I always kind of talk about the person striking, and then I move to their grappling, and I kind of, I mix in good and bad. I'm gonna do a little different with Perry. I'm gonna talk about what he's good at. So he still throws hard. He still has that winging overhand right that if he lands, he could catch Means and knock him out. He still throws hard leg kicks. He's still a pretty underrated grappler. He's physically strong in the clinch. He's surprisingly always had pretty good takedown defense. I don't think he's a good grappler, but he's okay. Like you have to. Well, I should say you have to be a good grappler to beat Mike Perry strictly in a grappling match. I mean, he still beat Mickey Gall on the ground. And he surprisingly has decent cardio. Like Mike Perry can still go hard deep into fights. Now the bad, he's flat-footed. His hand speed has really slowed. He's really awkward. His hands were kind of staying to the side against Mickey Gall. He wasn't cutting angles at all. He lacked head movement, and the amount of damage he has sustained over the years, for a guy that we both think probably doesn't take care of his body anyways. But, I mean, you think about Jeff Neal, Vicente Luque, Max Griffin, Santiago Ponzinibbio. Like, those guys, I mean, they beat the brakes off of him. Even, like, some of his wins, like Danny Roberts, that was a crazy war. Paul Felder was a crazy war. So he's taken a lot of damage. So let me move over to Means. I was watching Tim Means' interview today on the virtual media day, which anybody can check out over on Sherdog YouTube page. And I was on the Sherdog YouTube page and watching it. And what I liked about Tim Means is that he knows what he's at, and he knows he's at the end of his career. But the guy asked him, how long are you going to go? And he's like, well, I'm going to go till my body can't handle it anymore, and I can't get paid for this anymore. But he seemed like he realized that that's coming really soon. Now, when I look at Tim Means, he's southpaw. He's pretty technically sound. Like he's always been pretty technical. He's had to be technical because he's very unathletic. Like he's not a good athlete. Like I don't see Tim Means beating a lot of people in a like swimming match or the hurdles or whatever. He's long and lengthy, but similar to Brandon Royval, he uses his length to close his distance. He likes that mid-range more than like long range. Clean counter left hands. He likes to counter. He kind of hides behind a high guard. He keeps his hands up high. Lots of kicks. A lot of kicks up the middle. Also a lot of low kicks. But he's been rocked a lot. He can be dragged into a brawl that he shouldn't be doing anymore. Especially should not be dragged in a brawl against Mike Perry. He's very good in the clinch. He's a grinder, but that's actually a strength of Mike Perry too. So I'm very interested who would win the clinch battles. If it's more of a pummeling clinch, I think Perry will. If it's more a Muay Thai plum clinch, I think Tim Means will. But I'd be really intrigued if Means has like the Muay Thai plum and Perry's throwing dirty boxing hooks and uppercuts. That should be fun. Tim Means doesn't wrestle often, but he can sneak in a takedown. Okay, grappling, nothing spectacular. But I'm going with the upset too. I'm taking Tim Means, and the reason I'm taking Tim Means is I just don't trust Mike Perry anymore. Between everything we talked about, between the domestic violence, the punching the old man, the like getting married and getting divorced in like a week, the weird social media post, the girlfriend in his corner. He probably still has, even though he is greatly diminished and he looks like a shot fired at himself, especially in that Mickey Gall fight, He probably still has more physical tools than Means. I just don't trust him. And like, I wouldn't be shocked if he has like a Paulo Filo mental breakdown in the cage. Like, that wouldn't shock me. So I'll take Means. I'll take him by split decision in a war. That said, what I wanted to point out is Danny Rodriguez took a prelim fight on short notice. Like, I feel like Danny Rodriguez should have got this fight against Mike Perry. Like, Danny Rodriguez should get Danny Rodriguez submitted to Means. Like, I feel like he should have the fight against Perry. It'd be more fun stylistic matchup, but also like that's the guy who should be getting a profile fight on a pay-per-view maker, not a guy Tim Means who's got 1 foot out the door.
That brings us to our co-main event of the evening, the first of our 2 flyweight title fights. And there's an interesting contrast between the two, because while the men's flyweight title fight in the main event features a champion who kind of snuck up on the rest of the division while bigger names were sorting out their business, and before we knew it, he was the champ. The co-main event features a woman in Valentina Shevchenko who was seen as the champ in waiting before the division even existed for her to enter and win the title. Valentina Shevchenko, the Peruvian by way of Kyrgyzstan, is 19-3 in her MMA career, 8-2 in the UFC, with both losses coming by decision to possibly the greatest woman ever to do the job in Amanda Nunes in a weight class up 1 weight class from Shevchenko's ideal weight. She will be facing Jennifer Maia. Maia is 18-6-1, 32 years old as well. She is 3-2 in the UFC. Most recently defeated Joanne Calderwood by first round armbar back in August. I don't know if this will be the case by the time they walk into the cage, but there's a very good chance that Shevchenko will walk into the cage on Saturday night as the highest betting favorites in the history of UFC title fights. There are sites out there that have her at minus 1,500, minus 1,700 right now. Looking at this fight, I'll go ahead and go first. There is someone out there who's going to beat Valentina Shevchenko eventually. I don't think that person is on UFC roster right now or on Invicta or Bellator roster. Like I think whoever it is young and out in a regional promotion somewhere and hasn't even taken the step up yet. But clearly she's going to lose at some point. But the fighter that beats her stylistically is not going to look like Jennifer Maia. Even by the standards of one of the 2 or 3 most dominant fighters in the sport, Shevchenko has easy sledding stylistically against Maia. I know that MMA math is not infallible, but it can teach us things sometimes, and I can't get away from Maia's fight against Katlyn Chookagian. You know, in that fight, Maia lost a distance kickboxing game. When she tried to get the fight to the floor, she was not able to until the last round where she really went all in on it. If that Jennifer Maia walks into the cage against Valentina Shevchenko, she is going to get her block knocked off inside of 2 rounds. The same kickboxing exchanges that she was losing to Chookagian will be worse against Shevchenko with a whole lot more steam behind them. And she will be actively punished for seeking the clinch takedowns or shot takedowns in a way that Chookagian was either not disposed to do or unable to do. All of Maia's paths to victory here are just brutal. I feel the same way about this as I did Felicia Spencer versus Amanda Nunes, where I was like, clinch takedowns against maybe the nastiest phone booth fighter in the world. Yeah, like this isn't the one. So, yeah, give me Valentina Shevchenko by second round knockout.
All right. So you mentioned her loss to, she has 2 losses to Amanda Nunes. Her second loss being out, when she fought for the title up a weight class against the GOAT. You forget to mention, like, a lot of people thought she won that fight.
Yes.
So that talks about how great Shevchenko. Before I make my pick, you said that there's not a girl on the roster that you think that could beat her, at 125 for the title. If you had to pick one girl on the roster, who would you pick?
It's almost cheating, but I'd say it's someone like Macy Barber 3 or 4 years from now.
Sure.
With a developed game.
Yeah. If I had to pick someone right now, I would actually go someone out of the weight class. I'd go down to strawweight. I would go with Mackenzie Dern. Not that I think Mackenzie Dern is even close to Valentina Shevchenko skill-wise, but there's one area she's better, and that was strictly submission grappling. Maybe she pulls off a Hail Mary submission. So I kind of gave my pick already on this one.
Unfortunately for you, Mackenzie Dern somehow went and had a baby and then suddenly came back and had no trouble making strawweight ever again. So
yeah, I think that baby was making her heavy. So let's get it. I'll get into the challenge of Jennifer Maia. Not a great athlete, but she's pretty well rounded. She on the feet, she's more of a boxer. Hands are okay. Nothing spectacular, kind of like Calvillo. Like nothing excites me. She does attack with combinations, so I like that. She does stand her ground. Like she's willing just to stand there and like try to time her opponent's attacks coming in. But that does make her a stationary target, and she really struggled with the movement of Katlyn Chookagian. Like she just couldn't catch up to her. She is a brute in the clinch and can grind out a win that way. She has pretty decent dirty boxing, pretty decent takedowns, solid takedown defense. She is a submission threat, though the commentary team is going to try to make her sound like the female Gordon Ryan to try to sell this fight. She's not that good on, like, she's got good submission. She's not that good. And she's not Travis Lutter, the Michael Jordan of submissions, as Mike Goldberg once tried saying. So everything. So I'll turn to Shevchenko. Everything I just said about Maia, Valentina Shevchenko, everything good I said about Maia, Valentina Shevchenko also does. She just does it like 5 times better. And everything negative I said about her, Jennifer Maia, Valentina Shevchenko doesn't do any of those things. This is a blowout. The website I use for betting, she's a negative 1,300 favorite. You said there's one site that has her negative 1,700. I mean, if you really want me to talk about Valentina Shevchenko's skills, she's got the best jab in women's MMA. One of the best jabs, regardless of gender in MMA. She's so accurate. She slides in and out of the pocket as good as anybody. She's like a knife going through a hot knife. What do they say? Hot knife through butter. Like she just slides in and out of the pocket so well. Her ground game might even be better than her striking, which is crazy. Great clinch takedowns, good throws, good trips, brutal ground and pound. I think she plays with her food for a couple rounds and then ends Jennifer Maia in the 3rd round. So this is the easiest fight of the night to pick. This is obviously my lock of the night. I think it's your lock, everybody's lock of the night. Yep. Valentina Shevchenko wins. If she loses, this will go down as a top 5 upset in the history of MMA.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, numerically, it might end up being the biggest. And even in terms of the eyeball test, how shocking it was, it would be right up there. It would be, Sarah versus GSP level for sure.
Yeah.
With that, we come to our main event. 5 rounds for the UFC Men's Flyweight Championship. The defending champ, Deiveson Figueiredo, is 19-1 overall, 8-1 in his UFC career. He is 32 years old. He will be taking on Alex Perez, who steps up on fairly short notice. Perez is 24-5, 6-1 in the UFC, 28 years old, a product of Dana White's Contender Series, and if he wins, will in fact be the first alum of Dana White's Contender Series to win a UFC title. Right now, the odds are not with him to do that. The odds makers favor Figueiredo as a healthy 3-1 favorite, sitting right around -300. Perez, you can get him around +240 or +250. Before we break down this fight, just another off-the-cuff question for you. The original fight was meant to be Figueiredo versus the returning Cody Garbrandt. Garbrandt had already returned. Garbrandt in his flyweight debut. Who would you have favored in that fight?
I would have picked Deiveson Figueiredo. It would have been an exciting fight to break down simply because of their styles. They're both, the heavy boxing, heavy hitter style. So that would have been fun. So I might change my mind if that fight gets rebooked when I do film study, but just in a vacuum, I would take Figueiredo.
Awesome. As it stands, it is not Figueiredo versus Garbrandt. It is Figueiredo versus Perez. And I've got Figueiredo in this one. I mean, that's not me stepping out on a limb. He's a 3-1 favorite for a reason. But looking at him, there are avenues to beat him. He's 19-1, but I mean, even despite that sterling record, he has vulnerabilities. The question is whether Perez can take advantage of any of them. His one loss is to Jussier Formiga, and that one, Formiga just put on a clinic on him. Took him down, took his back, or moved into mount or side control in all 3 rounds. And it was a perfect encapsulation of what Prime Formiga had been doing to some of the best fighters in the world for the better part of a decade. Almost like just a little mini-sized Damian Maia, even though he was not a plus athlete, just was able to take people's back standing or find little trips and just was able to get the fight into his world. And he did that against Figueiredo, against a guy who was bigger, faster, stronger, younger, a better striker. And in spite of that, Formiga just completely washed him. I mean, it's Figueiredo's only career loss, and it's Formiga's best career win, in my opinion. Perez is not going to do that to him. Vulnerability number 2, Figueiredo can be hit. Even in fights where he wins, and even in fights where he blows the other guy out of the water, he's been hittable. I mean, his 2 fights against Benavidez were just complete destructions, but Alexandre Pantoja, hit him some. John Moraga, hit him and did some damage. Just Figueiredo came back with more, and it was all over. So there's the question, can Perez hit him? Well, sure, he's going to hit him some. Will he hit him enough to hurt him? Will he even hit him enough to win rounds? That kind of brings me to the last thing. One of Figueiredo's advantages is just how big and strong he is. But as he moves further into his 30s, that also becomes a liability. He is a guy who has openly said that the weight cut is brutal for him. And that never gets easier as you get older, unless you're Mackenzie Dern, apparently. And he fights like a guy who was mindful of his gas tank. He is a wait, then explode fighter in a way that, I mean, their skill sets aren't exactly the same, but the kind of time and gas tank management reminds me of the tail end of Jose Aldo's prime, where it made sure to throw enough strikes to win the round and maybe kill you. But we don't know, exactly what he'll look like in a 4th or 5th round. He's never been in one. It's not too often that he's even in 3rd rounds. So maybe there's the chance that Perez can drag him into deep waters. I don't see any of that happening. I like Perez as a fighter, and at 28, his best days may be ahead of him. He's got that little window before, the flyweight reflexes start to tail off. But, his last 3 fights, he wiped out Jussier Formiga by kicking his leg in, which just doesn't tell me a whole lot about him because I don't think he's going to do that to Deiveson Figueiredo. Then Jordan Espinoza is 1-3 in his last 4. He has another fight in the UFC, but he's probably fighting for his job. Before that, it was Mark De La Rosa, and Mark De La Rosa has lost 4 straight, and you and I basically just both tacitly agreed that he's probably the worst flyweight in the UFC. There's been nothing he's faced to even prepare him for this, and the one time he came close, it was against Joseph Benavidez, and Benavidez cleaned his clock. I expect that Figueiredo will do the same. Figueiredo does. He's measured with his output, but that doesn't mean he wastes time. I've got Figueiredo by 1st round knockout. Take us home.
All right. So, I'm more excited about this fight than I would have been the Garbrandt fight, just simply because Perez deserved it more, and I'm definitely a purist in that sense. I'll start with the champion Figueiredo. Obviously, the thing that jumps out to everybody is the power of Figueiredo. That said, I just want to point out that he's not Francis Ngannou of the flyweight division, as the commentator team's going to pretend he is. I think some of his, especially his recent knockouts, a lot of it had to do with Joseph Benavidez being shot, or pretty close to being shot. I don't want to take this as me being negative on Figueiredo because he is a fantastic counter striker. He's got he's very good at picking up the timing of his opponent's attacks, where he does it so fast. Like he picked up Benavidez' timing really quickly. The thing that most impresses me is his ability to strike with power while moving backwards. That's like the Chuck Liddell abilities I used to talk about. Really good head movement. Uses feints to draw out attacks. He will fight from both stances, though he's much better in the orthodox stance because of his right hand being a big power punch. He throws punches from weird angles, so it's hard to see. He will wait. Like you talked about him being conserving his energy, and I definitely see that's something he's seen definitely more recently. But he'll waste some energy because he throws a lot of looping stuff, or a lot of times some ineffective stuff. Like there was one fight against Pantoja, he like just ran at him and threw a punch. Just ran full straight and just threw a punch. Like it was a bar fight. Like you just saw your girlfriend kissing some guy at a bar. He does keep his hand. I like that he pointed out that he gets hit a lot because he keeps his hands low because he everything comes off of his head movement, having you miss, and for him to be in position to land this big combination, which when you miss, it works, but he can get hit. He does keep his chin high. The other thing probably the second thing that most impressed me is his elbows. If you crash the pocket on him, he'll turn from punches to elbows, so you'll run into an elbow. That's really impressive. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's very strong in the clinch. He's a good wrestler. He doesn't use his wrestling nearly enough. Really good reactionary double. He did it to Pantoja. He's hard to take down, and if you take him down, he'll just get right back up. Like you can't hold him down. He's very hard. He is a submission threat. I mean, like he had that beautiful guillotine on Tim Elliott. So if Alex Perez thinks he's going to come out and wrestle him and he shoots like lazy and leaves his head hanging there, he'll get guillotined. Cardio is an issue, though. It's a big issue. I saw in that Benavidez fight, he was slowing down fast. I don't know if it was the moment. There was a crowd there. It was his first fight. That was the one that he missed the weight. There was that big weight cut. So if weight cut, as you mentioned, is already been a problem with him, he's even older. If this weight cut is hard, that might drain his energy even more. Now let's move over to Perez. So you pointed out the Joseph Benavidez fight, and that's the fight that everyone who's counting out Perez keeps pointing out. So I rewatched that fight, and that's the one that I remember. I didn't remember what it was, but I remember thinking there's something I didn't like about that fight. Now one was the Yves Levine stopping Joseph Benavidez from striking Alex Perez. But the other thing I didn't like was Alex Perez went for a takedown, and Joseph Benavidez punched Alex Perez in the back of the head 50 times in a row. 50 times in a row. And I'm watching my TV, and I'm like, how is nobody mentioning that just back of the head, back of the head, back of the head? So I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on that one. I'm kind of giving him a pass on that one. That was also he's a young fighter. That was also his first big challenge, which, a lot of people could use it against him, which I understand why they are. So Alex Perez is a very basic striker. But I actually like that about him because he's good at the basics. He's you mentioned Pantoja being, I'm assuming not Pantoja, Figueiredo being a big flyweight. So does Alex Perez. Alex Perez is a big guy himself, so he might be the first one that may be able to match Figueiredo's strength. Not in the striking, but in the clinch in these areas. He might be able to match Figueiredo's strength. He is a pressure fighter, especially in his last fight. He gets. Jose Formiga fighter, I blew a blank for that. He came right at him and just came out with a high pace. A tight guard. He does make the mistake of just kind of covering up and hiding behind the guard, which will be a big problem against Figueiredo. Figueiredo is going to bloody him up because he's going to take shots. Even though once he's blocked, he's going to be taking him against the arms and stuff. He's got a very good right hand. And I love that he targets the body a lot, which goes back to, the basics, but he will win with the basics. That's how he's, if he's going to win. The Formiga calf kicks were fantastic. So good. He's a very good wrestler. Good top control, good ground and pound if he gets it. I loved in his, and you mentioned the De La Rosa being low level, but when he got De La Rosa down, he kept grabbing his wrists and then controlling and then throwing a punch. So he controlled so well. Low level competition, but I like that. So, into the prediction, Figueiredo is a 3-1 favorite. I think the line should be much closer to that. Yeah, I've been killing the line. I don't know who's making these lines. I've been killing it all day. Maybe I'm going to sound like an idiot because maybe these guys are right, but Obviously, I like Figueiredo's counter-striking style. I love his offensive grappling. He will definitely check the chin of Perez several times. However, the deeper the fight goes on, the better I think Perez will do, especially if Figueiredo slows down. Add in the fact that he could add some wrestling in, which might slow down Figueiredo, in those leg kicks. If he can find a home for leg kicks early, that will zap the cardio and the power of Figueiredo, and that changes Figueiredo so much. So I've called 3 upsets already. But if you remember, I did not call my upset special of the day. That's because I was saving it to the very end. I am calling it right now. I am taking Perez behind a heavy leg kick game. I'm probably the only one taking him, but I'm saying Alex Perez wins by unanimous decision. And that is my upset special.
You heard it here first. Keith Schillen with the upset special and new first alum of Dana White's Contender Series to wear UFC gold. He's calling the historic win, the big upset. So he and I have a recap show scheduled for after UFC 255. If that show is canceled, it's either because one of us was right about Figueiredo Perez and the other was wrong about Shogun versus Craig. Because if we're both wrong about both, or if like one of us was right about each, we'll have the show. Otherwise, if it's canceled, it's just because one of us doesn't even want to face the music. Nonetheless, that is your breakdown, fight by fight, of UFC 255, Figueiredo versus Perez, taking place this Saturday. Just a quick rundown of the picks. In the main event, Figueiredo versus Perez. Ben has Figueiredo by first round knockout. Keith has Alex Perez to hold on and win a unanimous decision. In the co-main event, Shevchenko versus Maia. Ben has Shevchenko by second round knockout. Keith by third round knockout. Tim Means versus Mike Perry. We both have Means by decision. Chookagian versus Calvillo. I have Calvillo by decision. Keith has Chookagian by decision. Of course, it's like the one card that we don't get a third person for this, that like we have a bunch of ties that needed to be broken. Shogun Rua versus Paul Craig. I have Shogun by decision. Keith has Craig. Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. Keith has Royval by decision. I have Moreno by decision. Buckley versus Wright. We both have Buckley by first round knockout. Antonina Shevchenko versus Ariane Lipski. Keith has Shevchenko by decision. I have Lipski by decision. Nicolas Dalby versus Daniel Rodriguez. Keith has Rodriguez by second round knockout. I have Rodriguez by first round knockout. We both favor Alan Jouban to win a decision over Gooden. We both like Daukaus over Stoltzfus. Keith by second round KO or TKO. I have him by second round submission. And we both have Cosce by first round knockout. That is it. Enjoy the fights, and we'll talk to you afterwards.